The rich man yelled, "You stink!" Garbage man just smiled, then pointed to the camera that exposed him. The air in Westport was still damp with morning fog when the garbage truck turned onto Maple Drive. It was just after 6, but the neighborhood was already alive in its own quiet way. Automatic sprinklers ticking across manicured lawns, birds scratching around fallen leaves, and the occasional clatter of a newspaper landing on a porch. Ethan Harris, 58, stepped off the back of the truck with practiced ease. 2 decades on the job had carved a rhythm into his body. He moved with the casual precision of someone who had lifted thousands of trash bins without ever thinking twice. His gloves were already stained from the morning's pickups, and the faded vest he wore bore the marks of 1,000 days of unnoticed service. He paused for a moment at the end of Caroline's driveway. The old woman had left a styrofoam cup on the stone ledge, like she always did when winter crept into the air. Black coffee, just how he liked it. Ethan smiled. Caroline, now in her late 70s, had been a widow for nearly 10 years. She had once told him that watching him do his rounds reminded her of her late husband's early routine. Always up before the sun, always working without needing a thank you. The two had built a silent friendship over the years. Warm coffee in the winter, cold water in the summer, and occasional waves from her living room window. He took a sip and turned his eyes to the mansion at the far end of the street. It hadn't been there long. The house was massive, glass and stone, all angles and ego. Too sleek for the neighborhood. It stood like a trophy, as if the very existence of the street was a backdrop to its glory. Ethan had watched the construction crew bring it to life over the past year, but it wasn't until last week that the owner had moved in. He didn't know the man's name yet, but the rumors had spread faster than fresh paint. A hedge fund manager. Young, rich, cold. Someone who wore designer clothes just to take out the trash. Except, Ethan noted with a dry chuckle, men like that never took out their own trash. As he climbed back onto the truck, Ethan caught a flicker of movement from the mansion's upper balcony. A man in a white robe, holding a coffee mug, stood staring at him. He didn't wave, didn't nod, just stared, eyes narrowed as if disgust had a physical shape. Ethan didn't flinch. He had met that look before, in boardrooms, upscale neighborhoods, restaurants where people lowered their eyes when he walked in wearing his uniform. But something about this particular glare lingered. He turned his eyes to the camera pole at the corner of the street, one that had been quietly installed by Caroline's son last summer after a string of petty thefts. Most people didn't notice it, discreet and nearly invisible in the daytime. But Ethan knew exactly where it was. He looked up again at the man on the balcony, still staring. Ethan gave a small nod, not of deference, of awareness. Then he hopped back onto the truck, tapped the side twice, and disappeared into the mist. He didn't yet know that this morning would be the beginning of something far bigger than a job. That this man with the balcony view would soon show a side of humanity no money could polish, and that every word, every gesture was already being watched. Before we move forward, take a moment to share your voice with us. If this story has already pulled you in, even just a little, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And tell me in the comments, which moment caught your attention first? I'd love to hear what you felt. 2 days had passed since Ethan Harris noticed the man on the balcony. That same blank stare, same coffee cup, same judgment carved into his jawline like marble. Cold and polished. It was Wednesday now, and the sky above Westport had turned gray and heavy, threatening rain. As Ethan's truck rolled to a stop in front of the new mansion again, he was already used to the routine. Collect the bins, load the trash, and feel that familiar pressure. The kind that comes from being watched, not seen. This time, the man came down. Not slowly, not casually. He stormed. The front door of the mansion swung open like a scene out of a courtroom drama. Out came the man, tall, lean, probably mid-30s, dressed like a magazine ad. His button-down shirt looked too crisp for a weekday morning. Every step he took down the stone driveway echoed like a warning. Ethan had just hoisted one of the black bags into the truck when he heard the footsteps stop behind him. "Hey!" the voice snapped, sharp, tight, filled with disgust. Ethan turned calmly, holding the lid of the bin. "You stink." The words were spat out, not said. As if Ethan's presence wasn't just annoying, it was offensive. "Excuse me?" Ethan replied, not confrontational, but not timid either. His voice was steady, deeper than people usually expected. Lived in. "You heard me," the man said, waving his hand like he was swatting a fly. "Do you really have to do this now? I'm having breakfast. You're right in front of my view." Ethan blinked slowly. He looked past the man, up toward the massive windows of the mansion. There was a long dining table near the glass, silverware, fresh fruit. One single person sitting there. A woman, blonde, not looking in their direction. He returned his eyes to the man in front of him. "I'm just doing my job, sir," Ethan said, neutral, like he'd said it 1,000 times before. "Yeah? Well, maybe do it later. Some of us have lives." There was a pause. Ethan could have responded, could have matched the tone. But instead, he looked up, not at the man, but at the camera pole across the street. It was subtle, just a flick of the eyes. The man noticed. "What the hell are you looking at?" he demanded, turning to follow Ethan's gaze. "Nothing," Ethan replied, giving a polite nod, the kind you give someone who's already decided they're above you. Then, just as calmly, he walked back to the truck and signaled his partner to move on. As the truck pulled away, the man stood in the driveway, muttering to himself, "God damn trash man." The name came later, Bradley Whitmore. It spread through the neighborhood like a shadow, fast, cold, unavoidable. Some had Googled him already. 36. Former Wall Street wunderkind. Now, a hedge fund manager known for aggressive takeovers and even more aggressive parties in Manhattan. His move to Westport had been quiet, but the whispers had grown fast. He wasn't just rich, he was rich and angry. That kind of combination didn't tend to end well. That night, in a warm house 3 doors down, Caroline Mitchell sat in her recliner, flipping through her crossword book with the evening news on in the background. Her cat, Daisy, purred softly on the windowsill. She hadn't seen the confrontation. But she had seen Bradley. More than once, in fact. Twice she'd seen him yelling at delivery drivers. Once, he had refused to sign for a package because the driver had dirt on his shoes. She remembered thinking, that man is rotten in the middle. But now she remembered the camera. She'd almost forgotten about it. Her son had installed it last year when a teen was caught siphoning gas from cars. Quiet little device, perched right above the street lamp. Didn't miss a thing. She reached for her iPad, opened the app, scrolled back. There it was. She watched the video. Ethan lifting the trash, turning, and then Bradley, marching like a man with something to prove. The audio wasn't perfect, but you could hear the tone, see the posture, watch the ugliness bloom in broad daylight. Her face hardened. She tapped save. The next morning, Ethan was quiet as usual. He didn't talk about what happened, didn't tell his wife, didn't even mention it to his colleague, Marcus, who worked the truck with him twice a week. But he did change one thing. When he pulled up to Maple Drive, he arrived 15 minutes earlier. And this time, he greeted Caroline with a louder than usual, "Good morning." She smiled from her porch. "Morning, Ethan. Your coffee's waiting." As he reached for the cup, Caroline stepped closer. "Hey," she said softly, "if anyone ever bothers you again, you let me know, okay?" Ethan paused, surprised. She leaned in slightly. "Some of us do see you, Ethan." His hand tightened around the cup, and for the first time that week, he truly smiled. The following week unfolded like a carefully wound spring, tight with silence, heavy with tension. Ethan continued his route like clockwork. Maple Drive was his second stop of the morning, and each time the truck rolled down that wide, tree-shaded road, he could feel the invisible eyes of the neighborhood. Curious, cautious, judging. And every morning, without fail, the same routine played out at the Whitmore mansion. At first, it was just the stare. Bradley, back on his balcony, coffee cup in hand, silent but expressive. A face that dripped contempt without a single word. But by Thursday, it had escalated. As Ethan hoisted another trash bag into the truck, the front door slammed open again. Bradley came striding out, not in a robe this time, but in tailored slacks and a sharp, dark blue shirt. He looked like a man heading into battle, and Ethan already knew who the target was. "You again," Bradley snapped. "I don't know how many times I have to say this, but you can't keep showing up at this hour." Ethan didn't turn. He continued loading the bin. Bradley stopped in front of him. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Ethan exhaled through his nose. He didn't answer, not because he didn't care, but because he understood something that men like Bradley never did. Silence was power, too. Bradley stepped closer. "You think this is cute? Just showing up and ignoring me like I don't live here? Like I don't pay for this street to be maintained?" Ethan finally turned. He locked eyes with the younger man, steady and calm. "You pay your taxes," Ethan said. "So do I," Bradley scoffed. "Please, you think your $12 a week covers anything in this town?" Caroline stood behind her curtains, watching everything. Ethan's jaw tensed, but he didn't bite. "I'm here for 15 minutes, he said. "Then I'm gone. You'll survive." But Bradley wasn't looking for a compromise. "Yeah," he said, stepping even closer. "Maybe I'll call your boss. Tell him you're harassing residents. You think they won't believe me?" Ethan gave the same small nod, the one that drove Bradley mad. And then, for the second time, he glanced toward the street lamp. Just a blink, but intentional. Bradley followed his gaze again. "What the hell are you looking at?" Ethan smiled. "Just the light." That night, in a dimly lit wine bar off Main Street, Bradley was halfway through his second glass of Cabernet when he spotted two familiar faces from the neighborhood, Todd and Lisa Collins. They were standing near the bar, sipping cocktails, talking quietly. Bradley approached with a forced grin. "Well, well, if it isn't the HOA royalty," he joked, sliding next to them. "How's the kingdom?" Todd gave a polite smile. "Bradley, good to see you. Settling in, all right?" Bradley shrugged. "Trying. Although it's hard when your breakfast view gets hijacked by a garbage truck and a man who smells like, well, garbage." Lisa's face didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. Bradley chuckled at his own comment. "I mean, honestly, the guy's a walking landfill. I'm this close to getting him reassigned." Todd cleared his throat. Lisa tilted her head. "You mean Ethan?" Bradley looked between them. "Yeah, That's his name, I guess." Lisa smiled, but it wasn't kind. "You know he helped my mother with her driveway after that storm last winter? Cleared it by hand before the snowplow got there." Bradley blinked. "And last fall," Todd added, "he fixed our mailbox after a teenager knocked it over. Didn't even tell us, just did it. Found out later from the neighbor's Ring camera." Bradley's grin faded. "Right," he muttered. "Well, I guess I'm just not a fan of early morning garbage men." Lisa took a slow sip of her wine. "Funny. I've never met a man who complained so much about a job he could never do." And with that, she turned back to the bar. Bradley stood there, stunned, ego bruised, lips tight. Something about their tone lingered in his head, a warning unspoken, but loud. The next day, something changed. Ethan arrived earlier than usual, 20 minutes before sunrise. The sky was still dark, a pale blue creeping in from the east. He parked the truck quietly and walked down the street, not with haste, but with purpose. Caroline was already on her porch, wrapped in a blanket, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "I figured," she said gently, handing him one. He accepted it with a grateful nod. Then, surprisingly, he sat. They didn't talk much, just watched the street together. Watched the mansion at the end, still asleep, still full of silence and secrets. Finally, Caroline turned to him. "I saw what happened," she said. Ethan didn't respond. She took a slow sip, "And I saved the footage." That got his attention. His head turned slowly toward her, eyes searching. Caroline nodded. "You didn't ask, I know, but I also know the way that man looks at people. I've seen that look before." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, gently, "Thank you." She smiled. "You're welcome. Now, go do your job. I'll handle the rest." The email was sent just after 10 that morning. From Caroline Mitchell to Westport Maple Grove. HOACC, Local Community Watch Admin. Westport Voice Facebook Group. Subject: Incident on Maple Drive. Security footage attached. The message was short, direct, and delivered with the precision of a retired schoolteacher who had spent her entire life watching people and knowing exactly when to speak. Attached was a video clip just under 2 minutes long. No editing, no commentary. Just a raw scene captured from the street lamp camera she'd almost forgotten she had. The opening frame showed the familiar figure of Ethan, lifting bags into the truck with practiced rhythm. The light caught the outline of his face. Worn, focused, respectful. Then came Bradley, storming from the mansion like he'd been waiting all night for this moment. Words followed, sharp gestures. And Ethan, calm, composed, giving only a single polite nod in return. But the angle caught everything, the expression on Bradley's face. The tone in his posture, the toxic confidence of someone used to winning by default. And that was the magic. There was no need for voiceovers, no explanation. The camera didn't lie. By evening, the post had gone live in the Westport Voice Facebook group, a digital town square that reached over 4,000 local residents. It was captioned simply, "Sometimes, the quietest people carry the most dignity." Within 30 minutes, it had over 70 comments. By the end of the night, there were more than 300. "I've seen this man help Mrs. Chang when her recycling bin broke. Ethan helped my son when he fell off his bike. Never said a word about it. Disgusting behavior from that rich new guy. If this was New York, he'd be canceled already. The way Ethan handles it. God, we don't deserve people like him. This made me cry. I'm ashamed I never even learned his name." By Friday morning, Bradley was already feeling the shift in the air. At the local gym, The receptionist didn't greet him with the usual smile. She just scanned his card and looked away. At the cafe on Main Street, the barista served him with stone-cold silence, even though she'd once gushed over his Bentley. When he stepped out of his car, he noticed two teenagers whispering and looking at their phones. One of them pointed, subtly, but not subtly enough. Bradley frowned. He wasn't used to being ignored. Or worse, judged. He pulled out his phone and opened the Facebook app. He hadn't checked the community group before. He usually left that kind of small-town nonsense to people with time on their hands. But now, there it was. The video. His name wasn't tagged, but his face was unmistakable. His jaw tightened. He scrolled through the comments, one after another, watching his reputation erode with every new word. Unbelievable, he muttered, then slammed the phone face down onto the marble counter of his kitchen. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan sat in his truck on break, sipping his coffee out of a stainless steel thermos. He didn't own Facebook, didn't bother with social media. But Marcus, his part-time partner, did. "Dude," Marcus said, turning the phone toward him, "you're famous." Ethan squinted. "What's that?" "Bro, you haven't seen this? It's all over the neighborhood page." Ethan leaned in and watched the clip play. The sound was low, but it didn't matter. He knew the moment. He remembered every second. When it ended, he leaned back in his seat and blinked slowly. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "I know," Marcus said, "but people are finally seeing you, man. Not just looking, seeing." Ethan didn't reply. He looked out the window, the soft breeze blowing orange leaves across the sidewalk. Maybe that was all he had ever really wanted. At the Whitmore mansion, things had gone eerily quiet. Bradley hadn't appeared on the balcony in days. The dining table by the glass remained empty. The fancy car in the driveway had dust on its hood. Inside, Bradley sat at his desk, reading an official-looking letter from the Westport Homeowners Association. "Mr. Whitmore, due to recent community concerns and behavior deemed inconsistent with neighborhood standards, the board encourages an in-person meeting to address ongoing tensions." He scoffed. "Encourages?" He crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash. Then he stood and looked out the window toward the corner of the street, toward the street lamp, toward the camera. And for the first time, he realized something he hadn't noticed before. That tiny black lens wasn't just a security measure. It had become a mirror, one that had exposed exactly what he was when he thought no one was watching. That evening, Caroline received a message. Private message from Bradley Whitmore. "I know what you did. You had no right. Take the video down. I will not ask again." She stared at the message for a moment, then opened her email, attached a screenshot, and forwarded it to the HOA board, with no caption at all. Then she closed her laptop, poured a glass of red wine, and whispered to herself, "He still doesn't get it." Ethan, meanwhile, kept working. He didn't change his route, didn't bask in praise, didn't post anything or speak to a reporter who'd already left him 2 voicemails, but he did start arriving earlier, walking slower, smiling more. And every time he passed that mansion, he looked up, gave a small, knowing smile, and nodded. Not at Bradley, but at the camera, at the truth, at the quiet strength that never needed to shout to be heard. Rain swept across Westport like a slow-moving veil. Maple Drive was quiet again, but not peaceful. There was something underneath, something you could almost feel in the way curtains moved just a little slower, or how the mailman didn't linger at any door for more than a second. Something had shifted, And for the first time in years, Ethan Harris wasn't invisible. He could feel it. Not in loud declarations, not in applause, but in the small, human things. The way people nodded now, the smiles from porches, the gentle wave from a boy on a bicycle who once refused to make eye contact. It made him nervous. Ethan never wanted attention, never chased it. He had built a life in the shadows, in the rhythm of reliability. The quiet man who showed up before dawn and vanished before the first cup of coffee was brewed. But now the town was watching him, and watching Bradley Whitmore. On Tuesday morning, as the truck pulled onto Maple Drive, Ethan noticed it immediately. A white envelope taped to the trash bin in front of the Whitmore mansion. Rain had curled the corners, but the tape held. The handwriting was too neat, too intentional. He pulled it off carefully, eyes scanning the front. No name. Just, "To the sanitation worker." Ethan opened it under the eaves of the truck's side mirror. "Mr. Harris, this is a formal notice that continued disturbances, excessive noise, and behavior that could be interpreted as confrontational will be reported to the Municipal Sanitation Authority. Consider this your first and only warning." Bradley Whitmore. No signature, no apology. Just cold, typed lines that tried and failed to sound professional. Ethan folded the letter in half, slid it into his jacket, and continued the route without a word. But Caroline noticed. That afternoon, as Bradley sat at a corner table in Carmichael's cafe, sunglasses on despite the stormy weather, he spoke too loud. He always did. "And if he shows up earlier again, I'm calling the city," he muttered into his phone, twirling a gold pen between his fingers. "I already warned him. The guy's trying to provoke me. Thinks he's some local hero now." A young woman 2 tables over looked up from her laptop, her brows furrowed. Bradley kept going, lowering his voice only slightly. "I'm not losing to a trash man, do you understand? I've handled far worse than this in the markets. I can handle one blue-collar martyr." But what he didn't realize, what men like him never realized, was that Westport was a small town, and small towns remember everything. 2 tables behind him, Caroline sat, tucked into the corner, sipping chamomile tea with a slice of lemon. She didn't look at him, didn't flinch. She just reached into her purse, unlocked her phone, opened the recorder app, and hit start. That evening, Caroline wasn't alone. She called Angela Reed, the local elementary school teacher, a woman known across Westport not just for teaching, but for rallying people together whenever something felt wrong. And she called Marcus Sullivan, a 27-year-old painter who had lived on Maple Drive his whole life. The kind of man who didn't say much online, but when he showed up, people listened. They all sat in Caroline's living room, the sound of the rain ticking gently against the windows as she played the cafe recording from her phone. When it ended, the room was silent. Angela exhaled. "He really said that?" "He said worse," Caroline replied. "That was just what I caught on tape." Marcus leaned forward. "He's not going to stop. Not until someone stops him." Angela looked at them both. "Then maybe it's time the community answered back." Caroline raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" Angela smiled, thin and sharp. "A thank you." The next morning, something new appeared on Maple Drive. Just before dawn, taped to the street lamp near Caroline's house, right beneath the camera, was a laminated poster. Bold black letters read, "Thank you, Ethan." Underneath were dozens of handwritten signatures. Beneath that, a second message. "For the years of unseen work. For your kindness. For showing us what dignity really looks like." Within hours, It spread. Angela shared a photo on the community group. Marcus reposted it on Instagram, tagging it, "Chubber Westport thanks Ethan." By lunchtime, a group of middle schoolers had painted a "You Are Seen" mural on an old utility box near the recycling center, with Ethan's silhouette holding a trash bin in the background. By sunset, Channel 7 News had called to request an interview. And Bradley? Bradley watched it all from behind glass. He stood in his kitchen, phone in hand, scrolling through stories he didn't want to see, comments he couldn't silence, support he couldn't buy. He paced the floor in silence, muttering under his breath. Then he picked up the phone and dialed. "Westport Municipal Sanitation. This is Janine. How can I help you?" Bradley spoke quickly. "I need to file a formal complaint against one of your employees, Ethan Harris. He's—" "Sir?" The voice interrupted. He froze. "We've already received 3 calls this morning praising Mr. Harris. Is this about his work performance?" "No," he snapped. "This is about harassment. He's showing up early to provoke me." "Sir," the voice said again, now firmer, "Mr. Harris has been working that same route for 22 years. There are no violations on record. If you believe a crime has occurred, you can speak with the local police department." Bradley hung up. Hard. That night, Ethan sat alone in his small kitchen, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. The letter from Bradley sat on the table. Beside it, his thermos, his route map. A crumpled napkin from Caroline with the words, "You matter," scrawled in blue ink. He looked at the items, then he opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope of his own. He wrote no name on the front, just a date. Folded the letter from Bradley inside. Added a copy of the complaint. Then the Facebook post. Then a printout of every message he'd received from residents that week. He sealed the envelope shut and wrote, in small block letters, "For my granddaughter, when she asks who I was." And for the first time in years, Ethan Harris cried, quietly. Alone, but not unseen, not anymore. It was Friday. The sky was clear, the kind of pale blue that made you forget winter was coming. Maple Drive was silent, unusually so. No lawnmowers, no dogs barking, just the breeze weaving through the tall trees, and the quiet anticipation of something unsaid. At exactly 6:05 a.m., the garbage truck came into view. Ethan was standing on the back step, hand gripping the rail, as the truck rolled into the neighborhood like it had thousands of times before. But this time, people were waiting. 3 porches had lights on. 2 residents were outside already, holding travel mugs, pretending to check their mailboxes. And Caroline, always Caroline, was there, too. This time, not just with coffee, but standing at the curb with a cane in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other. Ethan stepped down from the truck, already spotting the envelope taped to the Whitmore trash bin again. Another message. He sighed, stepped closer, tore the paper loose, and paused. It wasn't a letter this time. It was a formal notice from an attorney's office. Cease and desist. Unlawful harassment and intimidation. Signed, dated, stamped. Ethan stared at the bold print for several seconds, then folded it in half, careful and slow, and slid it into his back pocket. He turned back toward the truck and saw Bradley, standing at the top of his stone steps, arms folded across his chest, watching. Their eyes locked. For the first time, Ethan spoke first. "You're really doing this?" he asked, voice calm but deeper than before. Not anger, just disappointment thick in his chest. Bradley lifted his chin. "This ends now." Ethan held his gaze. "I've been working this street for 22 years, he said. "You've been here for 4 weeks. Bradley smirked. "You're not a hero, Harris. Just because some bored housewives decided to play savior for the local trash man doesn't mean you matter more than anyone else. Ethan stepped closer, not rushed, just enough to make his presence felt. "I don't need to matter more," he said quietly. "I just need to do my job without being threatened." Bradley's tone hardened. "You think you're untouchable now. The whole damn town is obsessed with you. It's pathetic." Behind Ethan, a voice rose from across the street. "Not as pathetic as trying to sue a man for picking up trash." They both turned. Angela Reed stood at the curb in a gray hoodie, arms crossed, with a quiet fury in her eyes. Next to her was Marcus Sullivan, holding a clipboard. Bradley narrowed his eyes. "This your little fan club now?" Angela stepped forward. "No, this is the neighborhood, the real one." Bradley's jaw tensed. Caroline limped forward next. "You embarrassed yourself in public, young man. No camera did that. You did." Bradley's voice grew louder, desperate. "You don't know anything about me." "No," Caroline said, with chilling calm. "But now we know exactly who Ethan is." She handed him the folded paper in her hand. He looked down. It was a petition, signed by over 80 residents. "We, the undersigned, support the continued employment and route assignment of Mr. Ethan Harris and condemn the harassment and defamation of his character." Bradley stared at the list of names: doctors, teachers, artists, retired veterans, mothers, teenagers, even some of the homeowners he'd been trying to impress. For a second, his mask cracked, his posture wavered, and then he did something Ethan hadn't expected. He stepped forward. Fast. Too fast. He jabbed a finger toward the camera pole. "You want a show? Fine. Keep recording. Watch this." But as he stepped off the sidewalk, his foot hit a patch of damp leaves. He slipped. Hard. The fall wasn't dramatic, but it was enough. Enough to rip his pride to pieces. He landed on the pavement with a dull thud, his phone flying from his hand and skidding across the road. Ethan didn't laugh, didn't move. He simply watched. Bradley sat up, soaking wet, his pants torn at the knee, his voice rising in sheer humiliation. "Don't you dare help me!" But Ethan hadn't moved a muscle. Instead, Marcus crossed the street, picked up the fallen phone, and placed it carefully on the curb. "You okay?" he asked, not out of sarcasm, but decency. Bradley looked at him like a wild animal backed into a corner. Then he stood, limped toward the phone, snatched it from the ground, and walked back toward the mansion, his pride bleeding down the sidewalk behind him. No one followed him. No one said a word. And Ethan? He simply turned back to the truck, climbed aboard, and continued the route like nothing had happened. But inside him, something had shifted. Not victory, not revenge, but peace. The kind that comes when you stop asking for respect and start receiving it. That night, the story hit the news again. But this time, it wasn't just a clip. It was a segment. The Quiet Man of Maple Drive. Video footage, resident interviews, photos of the mural, Caroline's voiceover, reading her letter aloud. A drone shot of the long, clean street where Ethan walked every morning, rain or shine. The final line of the segment said everything. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear gloves. And they carry more than trash. They carry grace. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled quietly into the Whitmore Mansion's driveway. It was early, before the sun had even crested the rooftops, but not early enough to avoid the eyes of a curious town. The back door opened. A woman stepped out. Tall, blonde, mid-30s, dressed in crisp, business-like simplicity. Not for style, but for control. Her name was Emily Whitmore. Bradley's wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife. She hadn't lived in the mansion with him, not since the Manhattan penthouse began to feel more like a fortress than a home. She had stayed in the city with their daughter, 12-year-old Lily, while Bradley sorted out his transition to a quieter life. She hadn't spoken publicly, hadn't responded to the messages or the press, but she had watched. And now, she was here. Inside the house, Bradley sat on a leather couch, hunched over, scrolling through yet another article about himself. The words were starting to blur together. Local tyrant. Entitled Millionaire Clashes with Beloved Worker. The trash man and the trash talker. He didn't hear the front door open, didn't notice Emily step inside until she spoke. "Quite the show you've built, Brad." His head jerked up. Emily stood in the doorway, rein still clinging to her shoulders, arms crossed. Bradley blinked, rubbed his face. "What are you doing here?" She walked in slowly, scanning the room. Pristine, cold, lifeless. "Came to see the mess," she said. "And I'm not talking about the house." He sat up, defensive. "Don't start." She dropped a folder onto the table in front of him. "What's that?" "Your real mess," she said. "Lily's school called me. Parents talking, teachers whispering. One of her classmates showed her the video. She cried in the hallway." Bradley's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "She's 12, Brad. She Googled your name and found people calling her father a monster." He stood suddenly, voice rising. "I didn't ask for this. That man, that trash man, he's been provoking me since day one." Emily narrowed her eyes. "Really?" "Because from what I saw, he didn't say a single word. And somehow, he still made you look small." Bradley's jaw clenched. "He embarrassed me. The whole town turned against me because of him." "No," she said, stepping closer. "The town turned because they saw who you are when no one's kissing your ass." Silence. Then softer, not cruel, but final. "You've burned every bridge in this neighborhood. And now you've set fire to your own daughter's name. I'm taking her off your visitor list, and I'll be filing the paperwork next week." Bradley flinched like he'd been slapped. "You're divorcing me? Over this?" Emily shook her head. "This? No. That happened a long time ago. This just made it visible." She turned, paused at the door. "You think you were at war with that man. But he wasn't fighting. You were the only one swinging." She left without slamming the door. Because silence always hits harder when it's the last word. The next morning, a different kind of envelope appeared at Ethan's usual stop. Not on the bin. On the porch. He spotted it as he waved at Caroline and walked past her hydrangeas, coffee cup in hand. The envelope was thick, sealed in wax, cream-colored. Inside, a handwritten letter. "Dear Mr. Harris, my name is Emily Whitmore. I'm not sure if we've ever met in person, but I've watched the way you've handled something truly ugly with grace my husband never deserved from you. I wanted to thank you, not for staying silent, but for letting your dignity speak louder than his rage ever could. I also wanted you to know that Lily, our daughter, has been watching, too. And when I asked her what she learned from all of this, she said that some people are strong without yelling. That's because of you. Sincerely, Emily Whitmore." Ethan stood on the porch a long time, the letter in his hands, the street quiet behind him. Then he sat on Caroline's steps and cried again, but not from pain this time. This time, it was release. Across the street, Marcus painted. He'd returned to the mural, the one on the old utility box, except now, he wasn't just painting Ethan's silhouette. He was painting a scene. A man standing in the rain, holding a trash bin like a shield. A neighborhood behind him. Hands reaching out. A light above him. Not from the sun, but from a street lamp with a hidden camera. And at his feet, a message in large, bold letters. You see what you stand for. By the end of the week, Bradley's mansion had a for sale sign staked into the lawn. No announcement, no farewell. Just silence. The for sale sign outside the Whitmore mansion stayed untouched for 10 days. Not because no one was interested, but because no one dared be the first to ask. The property, once a symbol of wealth and modern perfection, had become a scar, a monument to arrogance. The kind of house people drove past and whispered about. And inside, Bradley remained. A prisoner not of bars, but of reputation. Every time he left the house, he felt it. The stares, the pause in conversations, the polite smiles that faded the moment he walked by. And the worst of it? The silence of his phone. No calls from investors, no brunch invites from the Westport elite, no strategy meetings. He was no longer the man with the $1 million portfolio. He was the man who screamed at the trash guy and got destroyed by his own ego. But just a few blocks away, something else was happening. Something bigger. It began with a whisper, a small idea spoken at Angela Reed's kitchen table. We should do something, she said, tapping her mug. Not just a Facebook post, something that lasts. Caroline was there, of course. She always was now. And Marcus, arms crossed, covered in flecks of paint from finishing the mural. You mean, like a fundraiser? He asked. Angela shook her head. No, bigger. Caroline leaned forward. What are you thinking? Angela smiled. A day. They called it Maple Day, an entire morning dedicated to recognizing the unseen heroes of the community. The workers' people passed by every day without stopping. Sanitation crews, delivery drivers, bus monitors, janitors, mail carriers. It started small, just an idea. But Westport had been waiting for something like this. They just didn't know it. Within a week, posters went up. Flyers in coffee shops, posts across local groups. Local businesses offered food and gifts. The elementary school kids started writing thank you letters. And every conversation ended the same way. Do you think Ethan will come? He had no idea. Not until the morning it happened. Saturday. The truck stopped short at the edge of Maple Drive. Marcus leaned forward, blinking through the windshield. What the hell? The street was packed. Families, balloons, hand-painted signs on every lawn. Dozens of kids sitting on the curb, holding homemade banners that read, We see you. Thank you, Ethan. Real heroes don't wear suits. Even the HOA president, Todd Collins, a man who once argued about grass height, was there, wearing a baseball cap that read, Respect the root. Ethan stepped off the truck in silence. He hadn't spoken yet. He just looked at every face, at every child, at every sign and smile and open hand. And then, from the back of the crowd, Caroline's voice rose above the murmurs. Come here, Ethan. She stood next to a small table, holding a wooden plaque. Burnt edges, simple lettering. He walked slowly through the crowd, a path forming like water parting around a stone, until he stood in front of her. Caroline smiled up at him with the warmth of 1,000 mornings. She cleared her throat. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was strong. This town was asleep, Ethan, for years. We passed by you day after day, like you were part of the road, and you never asked us for anything. She held out the plaque. We're sorry it took a camera to wake us up, But we see you now, and we won't stop." Ethan didn't take it at first. He just stared at it, carved into the wood. Ethan Harris. For showing us what quiet strength looks like. For reminding us that dignity does not shout. For 22 years of service and one unforgettable lesson. A hush fell over the crowd, and then, slowly, Ethan took the plaque into his hands. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but the words caught in his throat. And that's when a little girl stepped out of the crowd. Lily. She stood just a few feet from him, holding something behind her back. Nervous, glancing behind at her mother, who nodded gently. Then she stepped forward. "Mr. Ethan," she said softly, "I made you something." He crouched slightly as she held out a drawing, a crayon picture of a smiling man beside a garbage truck, surrounded by hearts. It wasn't perfect, which made it perfect. He smiled. "Thank you," he said, voice cracking slightly. "This means more than you know." She smiled back, then quickly hugged him around the waist before running back to Emily, who waited in silence, tears in her eyes. The applause started with one clap, then another, then a wave, erupting not like a performance was ending, but like a new beginning had arrived. Hours later, as the crowd thinned, Ethan sat alone on Caroline's porch steps, the plaque beside him, the drawing in his lap. Angela joined him quietly, sipping water. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm tired." She laughed. "You're allowed to be." He looked out at the street, now quiet again. "They didn't need to do all this." "No," she said, "but you needed to see it." He paused. "What if I don't know what to do with all this attention?" Angela smiled. "Then just keep doing what you've always done. Show up. Be decent. That's more than most people manage." Ethan looked down at the drawing again. The little hearts. The smile. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a man just passing through a neighborhood. He felt like part of it. The day after Maple Day felt strange. The kind of quiet that follows an unexpected outpouring of love. Beautiful, yes, but heavy in its own way. Like standing in the wake of a wave you didn't know you were riding until it passed. Ethan stood in his modest kitchen, the morning light bleeding through the curtains. His uniform was folded neatly on the back of a chair. His thermos sat clean and empty on the table, but he hadn't moved in 10 minutes. He just stared at the plaque. The same hands that had lifted thousands of trash bags now hovered inches from it, unsure. Like if he touched it too long, it would disappear. The drawing from Lily sat next to it. He had pressed it flat between 2 pages of an old dictionary, like a flower you wanted to keep forever. A knock at the door broke the silence. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't loud. Just present. He opened the door. Caroline. She stood with her coat half-buttoned, hair wind-blown, holding a single envelope. "I wasn't going to bring this," she said, "but I changed my mind." Ethan raised an eyebrow. Caroline offered it. "Came to my mailbox, by mistake, from the city." He took it. The return address said, "Department of Sanitation, Office of Regional Operations." He frowned, opened it slowly. Inside was a printed letter, stamped and signed. And with each line he read, his heart sank into silence. Caroline saw his shoulders drop before he spoke. "What is it?" she asked. He handed her the letter. She read aloud, softly. "This notice is to inform you that due to upcoming departmental restructuring and route optimization, your service route for Westport, including Maple Drive, will be reassigned effective November 1st. A pause. You will be relocated to an industrial district in Bridgeport. as part of the new urban expansion initiative. Ethan leaned back against the doorway, arms crossed, lips tight. Caroline looked up at him, stunned. "They're moving you?" He nodded once. "Apparently." "To Bridgeport?" she asked, voice sharpening. Another nod. "But you've been here over 20 years." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Later that day, the news spread like wildfire. Caroline told Angela. Angela told Marcus. Marcus sent the screenshot to the HOA group chat. Within an hour, the Westport Voice had it posted on their Facebook page. Ethan reassigned. City shifts beloved worker to Bridgeport route. The reaction was instant. Heartbreak, outrage, confusion. Is this a joke? He's part of this neighborhood. He built this rhythm. Who signs off on something like this without asking anyone? At the Whitmore mansion, still unsold, still cold, Bradley read the news on his tablet. And for the first time in weeks, he felt nothing. No victory, no satisfaction, only silence. He stared out the same glass windows where he once watched Ethan with disgust, and now only saw himself, reflected back, smaller than he used to be. That evening, Ethan sat on a bench near the edge of Westport's park, watching kids chase the last pieces of daylight. He didn't want to think about the route, the reassignment, the future. He just wanted this moment. Then he heard the footsteps, deliberate, hesitant. He turned and saw Emily. "I hope it's okay," she said. He nodded slowly. "Of course." She sat next to him, hands in her lap. "I heard," she said. Ethan didn't answer. "I'm sorry," she continued. "It's not fair. And it's not right." He looked at her, eyes gentle. "It's the job." "No," she said, firmer now. "The job is moving trash, not moving people out of their lives." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then she pulled something from her coat pocket, a folded piece of lined notebook paper. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this," she said, "but Lily wrote it this morning. I think it's meant for you." Ethan hesitated, then opened the letter. It was handwritten, in the slanted, unsure pen of a young girl. "Dear Mr. Ethan, if you leave, who will wave to me on Tuesdays? Who will carry the heavy bins when my mom has back pain? Who will be the man who doesn't yell? I told the kids at school that you are like a shield for our town. One of them said, 'Trash men don't matter.' But I said, 'Not mine. Please don't go.' Love." Lily. Ethan folded the letter slowly. His throat tightened. "I don't know if I have a choice," he whispered. Emily looked out at the trees. "Then maybe it's time we make one for you." That night, Westport organized, not just in comments, in real life. They held a meeting, not a protest, something deeper, something older, a gathering. In the town hall gymnasium, people filled folding chairs. Marcus projected the letter on a screen. Angela passed around a petition. Caroline read Lily's letter aloud, voice trembling on the final line. They didn't chant. They shared stories. One by one, residents stepped up to the mic. "He helped my mom after her fall. He fixed our fence when the storm took it out. He always remembered my son's birthday, even when we forgot." By the end of the night, the petition had over 300 signatures. The community wasn't asking the city. They were telling them. Ethan didn't attend. He stayed home. But he knew, because Caroline showed up at his door the next morning, holding a thick stack of papers. "You're not going to Bridgeport," she said. "Not without a fight." He took the papers slowly, scanning signature after signature. His neighbors, his people, his story. written not in ink, but in presence. It was a Wednesday morning when the reply came. An official-looking envelope, white and sharp, dropped into Caroline Mitchell's mailbox. She wasn't expecting it, and when she saw the city seal on the front, her chest tightened. She didn't open it there. She walked 3 blocks with it tucked under her coat, the wind biting at her knees, until she reached the house she now visited almost every day. Ethan opened the door before she knocked. Their eyes met. "I think," she said, holding out the envelope, "this one's for both of us." He opened it with a butter knife. Inside, 2 sheets. No ceremony, no apology, just bureaucracy. But the words, they hit like a sunrise. "Mr. Harris, we have reviewed the community's appeal regarding your scheduled reassignment. After consideration, and due to overwhelming local support, your current sanitation route, including Maple Drive and surrounding areas, will be maintained. Thank you for your continued service. Department of Sanitation Office of Regional Operations." Ethan read it twice. Caroline waited, watching his face like a mother waiting for her child to find their own heartbeat again. He looked up, and for the first time since this entire thing began, he laughed, soft, gentle, disbelieving. Then he said one word, "Home." The news spread faster than wildfire. Within 20 minutes, Angela had updated the group chat. Marcus posted a photo of Ethan holding the letter. No caption, just the image. Todd from the HOA ordered custom stickers for the trash bins that read, "Ethan's Route." Even Channel 7 called. But Ethan didn't take the interview. He didn't need to. The people who needed to know already knew. 2 weeks passed. The leaves turned from yellow to orange to deep red. Carpeting Maple Drive like nature was preparing it for something sacred. On a crisp November morning, Ethan arrived at his usual time, 6:08 a.m. As the truck rolled down the street, porch lights flicked on one by one, like candles in a procession. At Caroline's house, steam rose from 2 cups of coffee. He took his. She smiled. "They'll write about this one day." "I hope not," he said. "Why?" "Because not everything good needs to be a story. Some things should just be." She looked out across the street. Still, it was one hell of a story, wasn't it? He looked at her and nodded. Across town, the Whitmore mansion sat empty. The real estate agent had finally sold it to a quiet couple who never asked questions and kept to themselves. Emily and Lily moved back to the city, but they returned once a month. Not for the mansion, for Maple Drive, for Ethan. And every time Lily saw him, she shouted, "Mr. Ethan!" and ran to hug him. He kept her drawing in the dashboard of the truck, tucked next to a photo of his late wife. The only 2 things that ever made him cry in the same way. On the first snow of winter, Ethan stood beside the truck as his partner hoisted a bin into the compactor. The town was asleep. Quiet. Still. He looked down the long, clean street of Maple Drive, the houses, the porches, the trees bending under soft white. And he thought about what had happened. How one man's rage had cracked something open, and how, instead of falling apart, the town had fallen into place, not because of a fight, but because of a reminder that some people carry more than trash. They carry the weight of the world, with their head high, with their voice quiet, and their heart unshaken. As the truck pulled away, Ethan glanced over his shoulder at the old camera pole. It still stood there, rust creeping at the base, a quiet witness to everything. He gave it a smile, then a nod, and just before disappearing down the next street, he whispered, "Thank you." End of story. The man behind the trash. Before you head out, take a second to show your support. A simple like, a comment, or hitting subscribe helps this story reach even more people who enjoy narratives like this one. Tell me below, what moment stayed with you the most? Your voice keeps these stories alive.